No, it's brilliant to have you along and to hear all about what you do and a little bit about regenerative agriculture and regenerative forestry as well. So let's dive straight into it. So can we hear, can you please introduce yourself a little bit, your background, and reNature?
Yes, perfect. Great. So nice to meet you. It's first time, right? I have been seeing you. So my name is Felipe. I'm the founder of reNature. We started as a foundation, and now we're also like a company, aside from the foundation. And everything started where I come from, a family that had been working with large-scale organic farming, with focus on citrus, so like oranges and lemon. They have been working for the past 50 years in this field of organic farming. And I was always passionate about agriculture and also about sustainability in general, about nature, inclusive agriculture. And then I went to the Amazon and I saw the massive deforestation for soybean, cattle, and logging industries. And I was terrified by the way we are treating the forests and the natural ecosystems here in Brazil. And I decided to move into sustainable agriculture. So I started reNature in Holland with my co-founder partner, Marco de Boer. And that's I met him in the Thoughts for Food Summit 3 years ago. So thanks to Thoughts for Food for that as well. And yeah, there's much more. And then, of course, we can go through the time of the conversation.
Yeah, perfect. So it's really great that you did meet through TFF. So I will obviously follow up with a question. So can you tell us how, you came across TFF, how you got involved, and then maybe a little bit more about how you met your co-founder?
Yeah, so no, basically like since I got into sustainable agriculture, I was, I had a tremendous driving force to look into ways that I can spread and then communicate the need and the urgency of implementing agroforestry systems worldwide. So I saw like in Brazil, there was so many successful stories of the agroforestry showcase, but there was not like mainstream, or it was not like it's not like in the big people are not realizing yet the need of it. So I saw that the Thoughts for Food was an opportunity to step in and then to communicate the agroforestry intelligence and science behind. So when I went to the first Thoughts for Food in Switzerland, I was extremely passionate. And since then, I always, spoke to all my colleagues, friends, and everyone that I know to start coming every year. So, and then I met my co-founder partner of reNature there. And not only him, but also like many other amazing people that we are now partners with. For example, Youth Climate Leaders with Cassia. So there's a lot that came from it.
Perfect. That's so nice to hear. And so it's great to then have you back now as a panelist. And so what's really nice again is that now you can, there are people everywhere listening in. So just from the people I see, I know we've got some in Europe, we've got Australia, we've got some from Brazil as well. So it's really nice to have the continents come together. And so much like you met your co-founder and now you're working in, in Amsterdam and Brazil and different countries as well. That's really great to see from a TFF perspective as well. And so can you tell us, what's your definition of regenerative agriculture and regenerative forestry?
Yeah, so regenerative agriculture is basically mimicking natural ecosystems. We use forestry in order to reach that point, mainly because of the creation of deep roots, soil regeneration, using trees to actually sequester highest rate of carbon from the atmosphere, but also like to increase soil fertility. And then regenerative agriculture basically is to boost ecosystem services while also providing food security. So farmers also can produce food in its own land instead of only planting major commodities industries need. So they can also feed from their own land. And aside from that, also like you have the biomass species, so like trees or grasses that it can replace external inputs. So either fertilizers, but also like organic fertilizers like manure. So it's really relied on creating this self-sufficient element to use trees and also like grasses to feed the system, as well as having the cash crop to generate revenues and then ensure food security for the farmers. So you have these three components which fulfills the design of regenerative agroforestry cases we have been built so far.
Great, that was a really nice way to describe it. Thank you. Just for the participants, right? So you can ask Felipe anything. So you can either message in the chat, which everyone can see, or you can ask questions via the Q&A option. And so then we'll ask Felipe those as well. So then, because you mentioned now a little bit about what the regenerative agriculture is, so what is, the clear difference between regenerative ag and regenerative agroforestry?
Sorry, between regenerative agriculture and agroforestry?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, basically like there's thousands of names people gives, like, but agroforestry is basically using forestry elements into the agriculture purpose. So like we use, for example, the natural succession so that it can increase the stratification. Like in any natural forest ecosystem, you have different layers of trees and then shrubs, and this creates like enough shade for other crops to grow in order to have a successful yield. And this intelligence behind the forest ecosystems allows some agricultural crops to have a better performance. And then this is the agroforestry element component into the story. And then the regenerative agriculture is basically using elements to increase soil regeneration. So sometimes a regenerative agriculture can be for grains, which is not exactly an agroforestry because you cannot really shade the grains. They need a lot of sun. Regenerative agriculture can be more defined as a simpler way to regenerate soil and to work with organic inputs as well. So it's mostly, it's closest to organic. But regenerative component, it really allows you to think along with the soil, right? And agroforestry is really mimicking the forest ecosystem. So we merged both because we believe that it's not only about like thinking in or like only organic and regenerative, but also thinking about using the trees to fulfill the needs of the landscape. So that's why we call it regenerative agroforestry instead of only one or another.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
It's extremely complex. There's thousands of names: tropic farming, regenerative agriculture, agroforestry, agroecology. Like, but in the end, like it's really about like thinking about how to make it most adaptive to traditional farmers. So like if a conventional farmer says, "Hey, like I'm not willing to plant 10 species in my farm," like so we make it a very simplified system, so not a very complex agroforestry, but a simplified one with 2 to 3 species that he can boost as his ecosystem services and also bring more economic resilience. So it really depends on the farmer needs and demand.
Wow. Okay. So there's so many levels to it. It's really interesting to hear. So, before, I have so many more questions to ask you just from what you've said, but before we dive in deeper into that, can you tell us what the reNature challenge is with TFF, and what do teams get who apply to it or who win it?
So you mean like the challenges?
No, so the TFF, so part of the TFF challenge now and the TFF Digital Labs is that teams can apply to the reNature Prize.
Yeah.
Right. So what is that prize? What does the winning team get?
Yeah. No. Basically, like I think like with this prize for the agroforestry initiatives, It's really about seeing which project allows to foster like the impacts on climate change for sure. So like which species could actually boost carbon sequestration, carbon stock, as well as of course like thinking about bringing economic resilience. So the challenge is based on thinking how these projects and groups of people, they can actually tackle the challenge, the idea of how to make it economically viable, and also think of using technology to help this to happen, because as you know, like regenerative agriculture and agroforestry, it is a knowledge intensive based agriculture instead of input based agriculture. So this requires technology to, you know, help in the process to make it mainstream. Because now with reaching scale into like different commodities producing regeneratively, we need technologies and machineries to be able to upscale that. So I think the tech side of it for the challenge, it's a good component, aside from also like thinking strategically how it can foster like social and environmental impact.
Perfect. Okay. I mean, I know that there are definitely some teams that are working in that space. So, you know, what is a winning team? I mean, you kind of said what a winning idea would be. So how can a team, for instance, that, you know, works a little, like has an idea working on a forest project, how can they, you know, what are some of the ideas that they have to be aware of to kind of make it, you know, take it to the next level? Are there some aspects that, you know, some questions they should ask themselves, or some ways that they can look to make their idea be that extra special?
Yeah, no, very good question. Like, I think these groups, they first need to understand the challenges within each commodity, basically. Like, you know, for example, soybean production in Brazil is now reducing because of the rainfall decrease due to the deforestation in the Amazon. This is a fact. It's like there's a lot of researchers doing that the yield of soybean is decreasing because of that. So this kind of research on thinking which crops and commodities, which is you know, highly impacting the planet, that we could potentially find a solution for it. You know, you think about soybean, palm oil, cacao, coffee, cotton, and then rubber and timber, and then you take, and cattle, of course, like cattle ranching, and then you take all these ones and then find like how can we find a solution which can use tech components, but also like thinking about helping ensure food security for farmers. So the teams really, the idea, the challenge is to really understand the challenges within each one of these commodities, but also finding a solution that it can be scalable for regenerative agriculture purposes.
Okay, great. That I think that's given loads of different aspects to think about, and it lines up really nicely with kind of what we as TFF say as well, where we want to see approaches that ideally bring in several different aspects and work with different parts of the food system, and obviously are sustainable not just in one aspect but in several, which is great. So on that note then, can you tell us about a really successful agroforestry system or example that you've worked on?
Yeah, yes, just to give you like also an idea, like I mean, when I talk about agroforestry, everyone thinks, oh my God, like is the solution to the world. Like, well, like there's a lot of crops that yes, goes very well in the shade. You know, if you're talking about cacao, coffee, palm oil, and you know, timber, also like this major crop commodities goes, they can only succeed actually in a long term if they're shaded. So what do I mean by that? Then it's really about thinking that all this chocolate and coffee companies, they're reaching out to us saying, hey, like we cannot, our yield is not going very well because of this unresilience in climate unresilience, and also like not being shaded. So there's a cacao agroforestry system here in Brazil. also a coffee one that it shows extremely successful results. Like cacao shows to be producing like around 1,200 kilograms per hectare per year, while conventional around 400 to 600 per hectare per year. Like
Wow, that's more than double. Okay, that's
yeah.
impressive.
And coffee, for example, also like it has been proven that agroforestry produce around 52 sacks per hectare per year, while a conventional is around 25, which is also double. And yeah, these crops, they can really be expressive results because of the need of the shade. Then if you're talking about grains like soybean, corn, wheat, all these grains that needs a lot of sun, then there's a lack of research in it yet. So we're working now on regenerative agriculture showcase examples here in Brazil to prove the concept that it's also possible to do it with grains. It's still in very early stage, but we are getting some exciting numbers for now. For example, we're planting Mombasa grass, which is a very strong grass that generates a lot of biomass as a fertilizer use, so that the farmers can reduce the cost of fertilizers, and they can also increase slowly the yield of soybean and bring this keep humidity, so that it can give some at least soil coverage to keep the humidity in soil, and also in the future influencing the climate resilience as well. So small steps, planting 1 to 2 crops next to the soybean, it has been showing some good results. But it's still a lot of research to be done in that case for soybean. And with the palm oil, we're gonna start by 2020 also in Malaysia, and then cattle ranchers is also significantly big. The changes like with agroforestry, silvopastoral systems, holistic grazing management has been shown to produce around 40 arrobas. I don't recall now the arrobas but per hectare per year, while a conventional is around 10 to 12. So it's like 4 times amount of beef that you can get from using tree lines and agroforestry components into it. So, and then when people ask me like, how is that possible? Like, how is that so much more productive? And then all these companies, they're not using yet. So agroforestry is something that has been, and regenerative agriculture is something that has been happening over like the past thousands of years. Like, but it's just now being, cocked up. So we're just remembering ourselves that this is a knowledge that was out there, and now we're bringing back and then putting that, using science in our favor to get these numbers, basically.
Perfect. So, I mean, yeah, these are very impressive yields, like yield increases. And so that's clearly like a great impact on the food production side and on the yields. What are some of the impacts on then like biodiversity, the environment, the climate, and then humans?
Perfect. Yeah, so agroforestry and regenerative agriculture has a major influence in the social elements. So social impact, for example, you can see like how much food security can ensure for farmers. So for example, like we're working with this farmer in Indonesia, which his major source of income was the white pepper. And so he has 500 hectares of white pepper, and then he plants only white pepper for the company, so as a commodity, right? But he doesn't produce any other crops for himself as to feed from. And so he goes to buy industrialized food outside because he's not planting his own farm. And then he gets sick because he's, just buying, crap. And then his children, he sees his parents like eating this and then getting unhealthy. They are not motivated to keep farming. So they go to the cities. So, and then there's no next generations farming with the white pepper. And also like so this cycle is happening elsewhere in the world. So the food security component of regenerative ag and agroforestry is extremely powerful, because we see that it's possible to co-create the design with farmers, so they can also be part of the creation of the of the design process. So they say, hey, I like avocado, I like mangoes, I like apples, and then we incorporate these trees, these crops into the design, and then they feel ownership. They feel more motivated to wake up every morning and then manage the farm, prune the trees, harvest. So this has been showing extremely like impact on the social aspect. So food security one, also inspiration, as I said. So for example, there's kind of a hidden impact. We receive a picture from a farmer from Kyrgyzstan in Asia saying, hey, thanks to you guys, with the carrots, with the agroforestry we planted, my kids not moving to the city, they wanted to stay here in the farm. So these are kind of impacts that you cannot really quantify, but it's out there, you know, like, and then, so the inspiration one, the health, the food security, and of course, creation of jobs. For some crops like cacao, coffee, which is more manual labor, it's more intensive labor because of the pruning of the trees, you know, like when you use also some machines, you need to be careful with the other species because it's more diverse. So these components increase the labor costs a bit. So, well, increase labor costs, but also allows to have more jobs in the region. So it depends how you see the element. And then the ecosystem services, the biodiversity reach, it really varies, right? Like, of course, depends on the crops, but in average, we have been testing and it shows like around 73% increase on biodiversity from agroforestry and regenerative ag to conventional, which is like extremely higher. One, because of course you're not using pesticides, so you allow biodiversity to be welcome. Of course, in the beginning they eat all the crops, so it's the farmers, they don't like that much. But then we always plant species in the design which allows to create this natural pest control faster. So the farmers doesn't complain that much. So the increase in biodiversity has been it's very big. And then also talking about carbon sequestration in agroforestry and regenerative ag is almost 20 to 25 tons per hectare per year, while conventional is 10 to 12. So it's also like a double, and sometimes even triple. Like it really varies because sometimes they don't even measure the carbon in the soil, which is much bigger than in trees. So it depends. And then the last one is so from biodiversity, soil, and then you're talking about water. So the water resilience in the regenerative ag is also extremely big because you cover your crops, and then you allow the humidity to stay in the soil. So you don't release water into the atmosphere, you bring back to the soil. And then this holds the moisture. So when it's dry season, you don't always have to irrigate your farm. You actually can create this resilience element. And then, because of all the worm forms and biodiversity present in the soil, the water start filtering in the soil, and then you have this water table in the topsoil very high, so that you can preserve water in soil. And then over time, of course, you have these leaves of the trees that, with the process of evapotranspiration, they release water into the atmosphere, and then you can influence in microclimate in bringing rain to the region. So there's a cocoa farmer here in Brazil which has reforested 500 hectares with cacao agroforestry system, and today he has, after this 40 years, today he's providing rainwater from his own farm to the local region because the other farmers extremely dry land. So the power of bringing rain into agricultural land, it's quite powerful, right? So
yes,
exciting.
massively so. Wow. Okay. I mean, yeah, he must be making friends very quickly around the area. That's definitely a success story. Brilliant. Was there more? I mean, just yeah.
No, yeah, I think the social inclusiveness, as I said, and also the ecosystem services looking to biodiversity, soil, and then carbon sequestration and water. I think it embraces the social environmental benefits. And of course, if you're talking about economical benefits, then as I said before, the productivity, but also diversification. So for example, there is this, can I share a screen or not? Yeah, I
I
think.
believe so, yeah. If you click on share at the bottom in the middle, you should be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, just quickly opening here, there is this coffee farm we're working on in Brazil, which is diversifying with a few other trees and crops. Let me quickly show you. Which their revenue streams is not only on the coffee. Let me show you here. This is a model farm we're doing in Minas Gerais in Brazil.
Right.
And so you can see like bananas, you can see the coffee shaded by. So there's coffee, there's African mahogany, which is a timber. It's a good timber to also sell in the long term. Macadamia, peanuts, and also banana. This is how it looks like. The idea of planting this agroforestry in the top of the hill was to actually inspire farmers in the bottom, which are doing monoculture coffee, not shaded, to see that actually this is the future of coffee. Not only us, reNature, saying this, but also Nespresso. We're talking to them to start one in Minas Gerais as well, in Brazil. So this is some. Look at how the neighbors' coffee farms look like. It's all monoculture, non-shaded. The yield has been decreasing dramatically, and then our system in the top of the hill will be a showcase to change this landscape into a more diverse and ecological function coffee. It's also mechanized, which is nice because then farmers, which has scale, they can also learn from it. Water and also on biodiversity, of course. So you use with the leaves of the trees, and also with these machines that are so the idea there of the machine is to use the trees like the African mahogany to shredder, and then you use the wood chips to feed the soil. And this is how you can create more self-sufficient system. And then the soil regeneration process over time, of course, the difference. And this is what I meant with productivity. So you have different diversification crops. So like banana, macadamia, and African mahogany. And they all have they all have their period of harvest, right? And then you can expect yields and production over time of each one, and then the revenue per hectare per year of each one. And then by quantifying the revenues of each crop, you can actually have a much more profitable coffee system in agroforestry than actually conventional. Of course, farmers have to be open to, find a market for other crops. We, as reNature in the future, want to create a marketplace for regenerative ag and agroforestry produce. So like saying, hey, we have 10 tons of coffee, 50 tons of bananas, and then we can connect to brands, companies that are interested to outsource. But, this is what I meant with the revenues. And this is the impact measurement that we do, quantifying how much carbon has been sequestered, how many vegetation has increased over time, how much water resilience, and then we use also drone imagery, satellite imagery to measure the impact. But that's it. I mean, I'm talking too much already, and then.
Oh no, you're inspiring. You're inspiring too much. You're not talking too much. That's really, really cool. It was really nice to see the pictures as well. I wish I was there now on the sunny hillside and could walk through it myself. So I'm going to follow up with a question from Felipe Villela, who's asking, how do you choose the species that you grow in an agroforestry operation to make sure they'll play well and benefit from each other?
Yeah, so basically we choose the species thinking about their stratas and thinking about their position, of course, and the distance. So each tree or each crop demands a certain time, space for root establishment.
Yeah.
And then other species, they also like more they need more time to grow and you can harvest. So we plant them that not as dense as it could, but mainly because of to make it easier for farmers to harvest and prune and manage the farm. But the species are really based on their strata. So for example, eucalyptus has an emergent strata, the highest it can get. Why? Because eucalyptus needs a lot of sun, needs a lot of attention from the sunlight. And then other crops like, for example, coffee or cacao, they like to be shaded. So they like some shade. So these crops, they can go beneath the canopy. So you always design in line with how much sun each plant needs. If you're interested, Felipe, I can also send you like a booklet showing all the how much percentage of sun each plant needs. We have guidelines for that, agroforestry guidelines, but it's really mostly about that, like understanding the need of that crop. So, for example, like people say, hey, in soy, there's this disease called the witch broom in a cacao farm. So we think which species could actually help to bring more natural pest control to avoid these pest diseases. And in this case, palm oil is extremely efficient to actually bring biodiversity back, and then tackle the witch broom challenge, like we did in Brazil as well. So there's these components of allocating the need and then the each plant to adapt that into a design.
And where do you try these things out? I mean, I guess by now you've been around for a little while, you know what each plant needs, but do you have any, I don't know, like trial plots where you try which crops work well together, or are you just straight on the farm and then you just try it and you hope it works?
So we did like because reNature has 2 years old, right? We are implementing new systems. So each system it's focusing on one major cash crop, like either cotton, cacao, coffee, cattle, soybean, palm oil. So these are all early stages examples, but they are all based on a deep and long research for like 30 to 40 years execution here. Because if you're talking about regenerative ag and agroforestry, people in Brazil, they have been doing this for over like 40 years. So it's also something that we are really like still using the components from the past experiences from the experts in the ground and bringing them into the international perspective, so that we can really make it mainstream and make it accessible for other farmers. There are most of successful stories coming from Brazil. They have been inspiring other farmers in Africa and in Asia. So that's what we are focusing on. And because of this boom and then the hot topic of regenerative ag is becoming now, whatever happens in US goes extremely big, and then people have some references of companies that are working with regenerative ag. But I had some, I heard some stories of like some people who are designing regenerative ag farms for tropical plants, and they didn't have much experience in the field yet, and they can also, well, they are failing in the design process, and this ruins the whole name and story of regenerative ag for big companies. So that's why reNature is really focusing also on its storytelling and communication, so that you can really like say, hey, like we should listen to the people in Brazil, because they are the ones who have been doing this for over 40 years, So we really want to be careful with who is designing, because this is extremely like subtle, like who is gonna start transitioning and adopting these practices, and it has to be very like a good showcase. So.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, yeah, good luck with that. And it sounds like you've got some great successes so far, which kind of goes nicely into a question from Anna, who asked what the difficulties and advantages are of being based in Europe and having activities elsewhere. And I guess especially Brazil, where you have most of your farms, but then your company is registered in the Netherlands.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you for the question, Anna. So basically, the reason we are in Europe it's mainly because of the awareness of the topic, that in Brazil or Indonesia and Africa, places we are very active, they are still being just injected by like what the industry are demanding them in the end. So, you know, like whatever the government authority decides to, or like the industry decides, like they're really like vulnerable to that. And then in Europe, like you can, my goal is to start dialoguing with impact investors, banks, and companies to start, you know, like engaging them to do the transition to regenerative ag and agroforestry. And then one, because they were not very familiar with the topic, which for us is our focus, like to convince who are not convinced. Otherwise, it wouldn't be any impact in it. and then they are the ones also like that wants to catch up and wants to be part of this, and they are really willing to learn about. So in Holland, it's a very strategic place to connect with impact investors, with companies. And then our operations it's mostly done from far, but we have all the local managers. So we have local experts and managers of the project, so that we can make sure that that we don't have to always fly like people from Europe to do the job. Of course, in the beginning we have to, but we want to slowly start letting the project managers, local project management, and the experts in the field to be able to do that.
Brilliant, thanks for that. And I hope that answered your question, Anna. I think that kind of brings us nicely into the question. So you mentioned, you know, you're talking to investors, you obviously have the farmers to take it up. You're finding like the farm managers, you have the guys like planning what to grow. You know, what are the different parties that you're talking to, and who is really easy to convince to do this, and who's kind of showing some reluctance to be a part of it? Like, where are the struggles there?
Yeah, no, very good question. Some people ask me like, hey, what about the government? Have you guys talking to them? Like, honestly, like policymakers, governments, at least like a place where we have done interventions, like they all like kind of like following whatever the industry is actually adopting in their country. Like, so for example, like you know, like there's like for example in Brazil, like you know, there's the president here that has some limitations in understanding the need of sustainable agriculture. But it's not because of that that I will not like allow myself to. It's just not our focus to talk to the government at the moment. Like, we preferably talk to the private sector that are really willing to transition, because they are facing the drop in their production, right? So there's a lot of like companies that are realizing that their crops has been decreasing, or they're, you know, like they are facing some failure in their yield. So they come to us saying, hey, and then we would like to start collaborating, and it goes faster. So, and then the government will follow over time. So our key target groups is actually private sector that wants to transition, and also farmers and communities that, you know, send us projects every week. We receive a project proposal. Like from China to Hawaii, we have received around 40 project proposals. 85% of these project proposals from farmers and communities and cooperatives, they don't have budget, so they expect us to come with the investment, which we don't at the moment, but we are connecting to impact investors, banks, to make sure that we can also help these farmers and communities to transition. So we're working from both ends, like demand from farmers communities that wants to transition, and also financial institutions like impact investors and corporates that wants to do the transition as well. So it really, and we are in the middle, like working on the execution, of course, like in the designing, in the implementation, and also like, you know, talking to these off-takers of the crops, and also the impact investors to allow these projects to go faster.
Great. Okay. So let's, you know, think back 2 years ago when you launched this. You know, where did you get your first investment from? And then for the teams now that are working on these solutions, obviously they also, you know, one of their questions is how can they make a business idea and a business plan that someone will back? So do you have any advice there? You know, where, when you're small, how are you, you know, how are you best to take this forward, and how can you kind of do that from your point of view?
Yeah, no, I think definitely like being, yeah, you know, focus on the solutions, and then talk to people, and like be optimistic, and then look into like that there are people interested in working on these sustainable projects, and then also come with a solution that it can dialogue the closest to the traditional farmers. I mean, of course, we can solve like many different cases, but in the end, like the need to guide and to help companies that are willing to transition at the moment, there's more challenge in there. And I think if there's a good idea in this segment, then we can extremely collaborate as reNature to help you in this process. Like, and then for us, the main challenge in the beginning was to, you know, refine our business model that was really focused on being on the ground, working with farmers and communities in the soil. And then now we are mostly doing, you know, like lobbying with impact investors and companies to really, you know, foster the transition. Of course, we would like to be mostly in the first one, but you know, not because of the lack of people in the second one, we took our availability for that. So if there's more people joining us to be able to create like business developments around regenerative agriculture and agroforestry, then we're extremely open and to receive and to be part of this movement.
Great. I think many teams will be happy to hear that. And so do you have any other tips to start off an agroforestry business, kind of in general?
Yeah, I think like to start an agroforestry business, then it's very important to, of course, understand where the experts are coming from. That's one, and then work with the people who really has a background in it, and then also like you know, like create more desiring appetite from consumers also to be part of it. Because sometimes when you're talking about agriculture, like some you know, usual consumers and people, they feel detached from it because they don't know how to start. So if we can actually offer like closest options for them to purchase from, or either be part of like a program which is they can go to a course, a workshop, then it's much more likely to spread easier and make it mainstream. So that's why in reNature we also organize the Change Maker program. The final list of the prize, the winner of the prize, will be able to join us in the Change Maker of reNature. And this is a week program that we always do. This year was in Amazonia and in Indonesia. And next year, we are not sure yet, but maybe Mexico and Rwanda in Africa. We'll see about that for sure. And then the team will be able to join us for this Change Maker program and learn on the ground about regenerative ag and agroforestry. So yes, go out there and be in the field to learn from the ground, but also like help in the business development process and also technology development. Like there's a question from Felipe Villela now that I see. Technologies are very needed, yes, One, like drones, robots, or whatever that it can help us to upscale. So like doing the pruning of the trees, for example, like, or harvesting of the crops in the trees, or going through the rows of crops, and also like helping in the cutting of the biomass. So all these elements of using technologies can help us to scale agroforestry. And so we're talking to a couple of like the IT developers to look into that, but it's still going very slow. So if you have any reference or any idea, feel free to come to me, and then we can talk about it.
Nice. Well, thanks for answering that question, because that would have been my next question. So we've heard a lot about how great agroforestry can be and the results it can have. Can we go over the potential boundaries? And I mean, is it a system that can be applied everywhere? Yeah, what are some of the drawbacks or the boundaries of it?
Yeah, so regenerative ag and agroforestry can be applied in any biome, any climate, like either in tropical, temperate, Mediterranean, and so on. Like it's not it is, the principle is the same. Of course, it will vary with the complexity or the diversification of it, and which species as well, of course. So it's really adapted to the local ecosystem. And that's why it's so difficult to make a recipe out of regenerative ag and agroforestry, because everywhere changes in climate, in species. So it's something that that you cannot easily like adapt into a package. But it's possible to do everywhere in the globe using the principles. Some places, of course, will be more challenging, like in the deserts, for instance, that you have just maybe some cactus, like, and this cactus you can use for like speeding up the process of water management in the soil, and then increasing yield, of course. But it's the availability of local resources that it can facilitate the process to regenerate soil and work with agroforestry systems. But it's possible to do it everywhere, basically. Yeah.
Impressive, impressive. And so you've just mentioned kind of working with plants. I mean, do you work with animals as well? Because I mean, things like bees, but also, goats, cattle. I don't know how integrative is your system or agroforestry in general?
Yeah, no, great. So there's a lot of examples also with silvopastoral, like and holistic grazing management systems with cows, rotating and then using trees as a source of nutrition to replace the grains, for instance, for cattle. And it has been shown, like from Wageningen University, the best agriculture university in the world, like that it's actually much more nutrition-wise to have branches of trees than actually grains, or either like grasses as well. So it's very efficient. But there's also like chickens, like agroforestry farm in Brazil. I have visited already, which is very fascinating. Like myself, like I haven't worked so much in other like in other than cattle farms, like sheep or like chicken as well. But yeah, like I know some examples, but I cannot comment so much on the other ones, like pigs. I also visited one in Holland with like a pig agroforestry farm, which was also interesting. And then bees, they are also like incorporated into like more like crops, like coffee or cotton, that are used in scale to produce honey as well. Yeah.
Nice. So we are coming, I mean, I still have many questions to ask, but we are coming to the end of it. So if anybody has more questions, do get them in before we finish. So I have another question. So you know, in Europe or in the North America as well, it's very intensive farming systems with a lot of monoculture. Do you think agroforestry is something that will be taken up here, you know, in the next few years? Especially, I mean, you mentioned it needs more labor. Well, you can't use the massive machinery. You know, how does it work in systems like that? And what have your experiences been?
In my opinion, every landscape will need to be transformed. Like the way we're actually producing at the moment, the soil fertility will decrease. So there is a need for shifting in any way you can imagine, like to, you know, otherwise we keep eroding and degrading our soils. Like we have already 2 billion hectares of soil degraded, which is like equals to 1/3 of arable land today in the world. And this all done by, you know, human intervention on like in the agricultural landscape. So like in the end, I strongly believe that every company that are sourcing from these landscapes, they need to reconsider the way they're managing the soil and their production units. So yes, I believe that regenerative ag and agroforestry is a solution for that. I'm not saying that we have to do agroforestry in every corner of this planet, but we can do enough to create a balance in the ecosystem, enough to avoid the climate collapse. Like, so if we can sequester around 2 billion tons of carbon from the atmosphere and having a very diverse, healthy ecosystem, then we can, we don't have to go expand and do everywhere in the globe, but it's just more logical and it's much more scientifically proven to be more success for the environment and for the farmers. So why not? So that's it from my side. And I really appreciate your invitation and your moderation here. Thank you so much. And it's a big pleasure to meet you as well.
Yeah, no, and you, and thanks for joining us for sure. I was going to ask, you know, for a final word on what's the future of agriculture, but I think you've just answered that really nicely, what your vision is. So I guess instead I'm going to ask, you know, for the teams that are with us now and are going to listen to this later, you know, do you have any words of wisdom, words of inspiration? You know, I mean, this whole thing has been really inspiring, and I'm definitely going to look up a lot about agroforestry afterwards. But yeah, do you have any kind of wisdom from your side for them?
Yes, come to the TFF Summit, and then you know, just think of a solution that it can really tackle the challenges of the social element and the environment element, and also the economic resilience element. And then we're here to help you. Just, you know, follow your intuition and which element of the supply chain or which element of this whole scope of regenerative ag and agroforestry challenge that you could tackle, and we're here to help you in this process. So let's do this.
Oh, that was beautifully said. Nice. Well, thank you so much. If our attendees have got any more questions, this is your final chance. But no, I mean, thank you so much for joining us. And it's really great to hear from someone who's also gone through the TFF process to see where you are now. And especially, I mean, it's nice for us to hear that you've met great people along the way and even your co-founder along the way, which is obviously nice for us. But yeah, so as usual, this has been recorded, so it'll be available to everybody else to listen afterwards. And yeah, you know, if any team wants to find out more or get in touch, get in touch with me, you know where to reach me, and go for the reNature Prize if agroforestry is something you want to tackle. Perfect. Have a great day, and hope to be in touch soon.
Thank you so much, Mahi. It was great to meet you, and looking forward for the next one.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.